And so much, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Nina Schick. Nina is an investigative journalist. She is a broadcaster and contributor to outlets like Bloomberg, Sky, CNN, BBC. Recently, she had a documentary on 60 Minutes in the US. She has been published in many national newspapers. She's also advising global leaders like Biden and Rasmussen in the past around these deepfake technologies. She has a very interesting background, speaks 7 languages, but don't worry, today she will primarily speak English. And she published a wonderful book that inspired us to start with this book, Real Fake, called Deepfake, The Coming Infocalypse. It's a book that is fascinating and terrifying at the same time. So, Nina, welcome to you, and so glad that you could join us today.
Glad to be here.
So, hi, Nina. About your book, and the title of your book is Deepfakes and the Coming Infocalypse. But can you explain what exactly deepfakes are and how they could lead to an infocalypse?
Well, a deepfake is essentially a piece of synthetic media. So that's to say fake media that's either been manipulated by artificial intelligence or entirely generated by artificial intelligence. And they can come in the form of pictures, audio, video, and text, or even data, as was just kind of alluded to in Yorick's working group. Now, deepfakes are so revolutionary because it's only been within the realm of the possible for AI to create fake content or fake media for about 5 years or so, and the technology is rapidly accelerating. And what it means is that content production and the creation of fake media that cannot be distinguished from authentic media, because AI is able to create fake media that is so good that no human would be able to tell the difference between authentic and synthetic. Well, this process is going to be democratized by artificial intelligence. And it essentially means that a single creator, like a TikToker, will be able to access the same level of audiovisual effects as a Hollywood studio would be able to do today. That might require teams of special effects artists today and multi-million-dollar budgets, but AI will change all of that as everybody or anybody will be able to access Hollywood-level media manipulation and production tools with next to no skill and no budget using a device like a smartphone. From a disinformation perspective, it is a potentially very dangerous development because it's democratizing one of the most potent forms of human communication, that is audiovisual media. But from a business perspective, the creation of content is going to become a streamlined perspective. So from my perspective, deepfakes herald a media and communications revolution analogous in its scale, I think, to the birth of the internet itself. I have no doubt that AI will increasingly be used to generate all forms of media and all forms of content. According to my research, by 2030, some experts estimate that up to 90% of video content online will be generated by artificial intelligence. So this is really a huge development, and it's happening at a time when audiovisual media in particular is becoming the most important medium of human communication. Of those of us who are already online, 67%, that's 2/3, already go to video and audiovisual media first as our primary source of information. So this really is much larger than potentially even a very potent form of disinformation. This is, as I say, a revolution in the future of human communication and perception.
And so Nina, to extend on that point that you make, because I find that very interesting, is that the first 20 years of this millennium were dominated by internet technology, and you're saying that the next 20 years will be dominated by AI. At the same time, when the internet started, I was actually around, as you can see from my few but gray hairs. we were very optimistic, right? We had stories that this would democratize everyone and everybody would have a library at their fingertips, and we had the information superhighway and beautiful optimistic stories. And then pretty quickly also the bad stuff happened. Now with deepfakes, the bad stuff is happening first, and now we are starting to see the more positive use. Is that also what you see, Nina? And why is it like that?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on to, again, make the analogy to the foundation of the internet, because this really can be seen as another development that started on the scale with the invention of the internet in the 70s. And of course, at the time, the utopian founders of the internet imagined that this would be an unmitigated good for humanity. And what we've seen since then is that the internet has a dark underbelly as well. The connecting thread is that synthetic media, just like the internet and just like all other powerful technologies of the exponential age, are an amplifier of human intention. So just as it was naive to believe that the internet would be an unmitigated good for humanity, similarly, to proclaim that synthetic media or deepfakes are wholly bad or nefarious is also not true. Whilst there is no doubt that deepfake technology is already being weaponized by bad actors, there is a whole another side to this coin, which is, the enormous potential of synthetic media as well. So just like we didn't have a debate in the 1970s about, how could the benefits of the internet be realized whilst baking some security measures into the architecture of the information ecosystem. Now we have an opportunity to do for synthetic media. How do we realize some of the benefits of synthetic media while mitigating some of the worst use cases?
Okay, so Nina, as you know, as we have prepared with you, is that we have some panelists that are going to ask you some questions. And so the first panelist is Daisy. That's our only created virtual human, and she has a question for you.
Hi, Nina. As a virtual human, I regard myself as an authority, like you, on the topic of deepfake and synthetic media. My question to you is, has technology already reached the level where virtual humans become indistinguishable from real humans?
Well, we're starting to get there. And Daisy, you can still tell that she's, a virtual human. She's not real. But already, if you look at some of the kind of other deepfake content creations out there, I'm thinking famously of Deep Tom Cruise, for example. Maybe people in the audience have interacted with the deepfake of Tom Cruise, which went viral on TikTok, which is indistinguishable from the real deal. It's getting better and better. And this comes down to the fact that one of the most astonishing things about artificial intelligence is this unique ability for it to recreate fake humans. And this was always really tricky before it was possible to synthetically generate deep fakes, because even the best special effects, whether it was CGI or VFX, the kind of humans that were created weren't entirely convincing. There's a phenomenon known as uncanny valley, which is when something that isn't human tries to appear human, but it doesn't quite convince us. What AI has done very quickly over the last few years, thanks in part to the revolution in deep learning over the last decade, is bridge uncanny valley. So when you look at synthetic content that's generated by artificial intelligence, it is entirely convincing in its ability to create fake humans. And this manifests broadly in two ways. One, with deepfakes and synthetic media, you're able to create synthetic humans that don't exist. So people who aren't people at all, who, if you saw them in a synthetic representation, like a picture, you'd imagine are real. We wouldn't be able to tell this is not a real human. And secondly, with the right training data, AI can also be used to clone the biometrics of an existing human. So if AI is trained with the right training data, it can replicate a real human in a film or by creating an audio track of that human's voice.
Well,
so that is really revolutionary.
Let's do a little test then. We will ask our audience to detect fakery, and we have prepared 3 voices of actors, 2 actors and 1 actress. one actress. And the question on the quiz Menti will be, can you tell which one is fake?
So we will play the 3 videos.
We will play
right
the 3
now,
videos.
And then pose you the question.
Yes.
We all have the capacity to be creative. We're all driven to share our deepest dreams and ideas with the world. When we think of the most talented creative people, they speak to us in a unique way.
There's been many moments where I would say I found my voice. Almost every decade, I've managed to find a new voice for myself.
The important thing is it brought us back here, together, back to our senses.
Now you're the expert, Nina, so you keep silent. We first asked a question to for the attendees on Menti.
So they get like 10 seconds
Yeah.
to answer.
Let's wait a couple of seconds more. Time's up.
So, I don't know if you can see it, Nina, but what you see is that most people were able to spot. So 75 people actually spotted Val Kilmer as the fake one. But what's interesting is that some people actually thought that the Morgan Freeman example was the fake one. So that's quite interesting. So, of course, Val Kilmer was the real fake. But there's more to it, to this story. And now, before I ask you, Nina, to respond to this story and to this technology, maybe we should watch the full video of Val Kilmer, because he actually lost his voice to throat cancer, and using sonetic technology, he is able to speak again. So let's watch this clip.
A phrase we often hear is having a creative voice. But I was struck by throat cancer. After getting treated, my voice as I knew it was taken away from me. People around me struggle to understand me when I'm talking. But despite all that, I still feel I'm the exact same person. Still the same creative soul. The soul that dreams ideas and stories constantly. But now I can express myself again. I can bring these dreams to you and show you this part of myself once more. A part that was never truly gone, just hiding away.
So Nina, of course, this is dramatic with this beautiful music behind it, but are these kind of applications, are these the positive uses of deepfake that you imagine?
It is an absolutely brilliant example of the positive uses of synthetic media. And in fact, this is an outlying case for a Hollywood actor. There is actually already a synthetic media generation company called Vocal ID that does exactly this. It uses AI and synthetically generated voices to give those who have lost the ability to speak, or perhaps never had the ability to speak due to debilitative diseases like cancer or strokes, it gives them the ability to either have a voice for the first time or to re-find their voice. So this is one very clear example of the positive uses of synthetic media. However, again, context is everything, because you can imagine how this ability to use AI to clone one's voice in a different context could be devastating, just as in this one, it's life-changing for transformative and good purposes.
Yeah, okay, so this voice cloning is not, it's a very positive thing. It could be a huge solution for people, but it's not always positive, right, Menno?
No, talking about deep fake voices, Nina, so there's two sides of the pancake I've learned today. There's pancake two sides. There's breaking news from Forbes about a $35 million fraud of a deep fake of a bank manager in the United Arab Emirates, which is definitely bad, but this is a confusion case. You must have heard about it. It's Anthony Bourdain. His voice was recreated in a documentary after his death. And I have a question for you, but maybe we should first look at the Anthony Bourdain media coverage of that issue of recreating a voice of Anthony Bourdain in a documentary.
Well, tonight, a new debate is raging over the use of artificial intelligence in a film on the life of celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, who died by suicide in 2018. CBS's Jim Axelrod takes a look.
The goal of the new documentary about Anthony Bourdain was straightforward.
Here's a little preemptive truth-telling.
As the director, Morgan Neville, told me.
I want people to be able to make some sense out of his death.
But it turns out how it was made was not.
You were successful, and I am successful, and I'm wondering, are you happy?
That soundbite was something Bourdain wrote, but never actually said. Listen again.
You were successful, and I am successful.
The voice was generated by a computer, a use of artificial intelligence Neville called a modern storytelling technique, but did not disclose to the viewer.
To put a voice to something that someone never said, only wrote, is a really bad idea. I think to do that and then not disclose that you've done it is a colossally bad idea.
So I think you feel the question coming, Nina. So is it ethically okay to recreate someone's voice without explicit saying okay before you die? And what can you do about it?
Well, in this instance, it's easy to condemn the resurrection of Bourdain from the dead because both his estate and his ex-wife came out afterwards saying they hadn't condoned it and that Bourdain himself would have hated it. But this is really the perfect example of the huge ethical quandaries and profound philosophical questions that the synthetic future will pose of us, because there are so many gray areas. Whilst in this instance, it's possible to say, okay, we condemn this, and the director of the film should have clearly stated that this was the case. But could AI, for example, be used to resurrect a loved one as a way to overcome grief? How about in terms of education? For example, if you took Abraham Lincoln and he was to give a speech, historic speech, synthetically as a learning exercise. What about for legitimate entertainment purposes? For example, James Dean's estate was involved in discussions to resurrect him from the dead. So I think as synthetic media becomes ubiquitous, these are all ethical and philosophical questions we need to debate in far more detail.
We don't have the answer yet.
Well, in the book, I think, Menno, you address it a little bit with the chapter about reality ethics, right? And so we already give some pointers towards that. Nina, as you know, so I already introduced Zoe as one of our panel members, but we also have Andrew Keane as a distinguished panel member, and he has a question for you. So here he is.
Hello, Nina. Andrew Keane here, talking to you from Northern California and San Francisco. As I'm sure you know, America at the moment is preoccupied with the impact of social media and Facebook in particular on our culture, our politics, and indeed our democracy. Back in 2011, I wrote a book called Digital Vertigo, warning the world of the impact of social media and Facebook in particular. I warned the world that unless we controlled it and regulated it in some way, it was going to destroy democracy, or at least undermine it. A few years later, I wrote a book called How to Fix the Future, in which I laid out a series of steps to regulate social media. So Nina, let's fast forward a little bit from 2011 to 2021. Back in 2011, the new thing was social media. Today, in 2021, the new thing is real fake technology, synthetic media technology, about which the Schick guys have written a wonderful new book. So my question to you, Nina, is in 2021, do we need to get ahead of the game? Zuckerberg famously said, move fast and break things. That's been the story of social media and technology in general over the last few years as it's radically disrupted the world. But as real fake technology radically disrupts everything, even our version of the world itself, even our concept of the truth, do we need to regulate synthetic media, Nina? Do we need to get ahead of Silicon Valley? Do the regulators need to address the problems before they happen?
I think the question and the work that Andrew has done basically highlights one of the biggest challenges facing humanity collectively. And that's, for the past 30 years, the kind of technological revolution unleashed by the information age has completely upended the norms and accepted realities of the analog age. And this disruption, for which the internet can kind of be seen as a starting point, is accelerating all the time with the exponential technology surrounding us, for which synthetic media is obviously coming into the fore now. I think that in our lifetime, we will see more technology-led change than has been experienced by humanity collectively before us. So we absolutely need to think about this epoch broadly as one representing a paradigm change. So the old rules, whether they be enforced by the institutions or legal systems or regulators, are often no longer fit for purpose and need to be redrafted, rethought, remade to better fit and reflect our new reality. And one part of this, of course, does include drafting regulation for this kind of emerging metaverse in which the physical and digital worlds start to increasingly become blurred and become one thing. And when it comes to deepfakes, we're starting to see, for example, the European Parliament taking a regulatory approach to deepfakes. But I will caveat that by saying that when we think about regulating deepfakes, just like any other regulation, it needs to be crafted and drafted very carefully with a lot of thought and allowing for the many different contexts, both good and bad, in which synthetic media will emerge. So we need to think about how do we mitigate against some of the worst use cases of deepfakes, some of which are clearly easy to identify, for example, non-consensual pornography, whilst also allowing the innovative side of synthetic media, which is going to bring so much positive growth to our businesses and also affect the future of human communication in a way that's utterly profound. How do we allow that innovation to flourish without stifling it? So ultimately, there's no easy answer, but yeah, regulation has to play a part of the future solution.
So something needs to be done, or maybe a lot needs to be done. And when we prepared our session and you asked who's in the audience, what are the people engaged in this event? And we shared with you who are, you shared, then I have a question for a debate, something that they should debate about. Can you help us a little bit introducing that roundtable debate question for us?
Absolutely. So it already sounds from like the audience has already thought about kind of both sides of the coin. My own background is in geopolitics. So when I first encountered deepfakes, when they started emerging in the form of non-consensual pornography at the end of 2017, it was clear to me that they could become a very potent tool of political disinformation and that they would be continuing in the vein of this corrupted information ecosystem, which has already been created. However, as my research continued, it quickly became evident that deepfakes were not only a threat to politics, but also to every single organization and business. And I devoted an entire chapter to that in my book, which came out last year. As early as 2019, when deepfake technology was still in its infancy, Forrester, the research firm, predicted that last year in 2020, it would do damage worth $250 million to the economy. But of course, as this technology accelerates, these figures can also be expected to go up exponentially. They are no longer an outside threat, according to even the FBI, which just earlier this year released an alert saying that deepfakes are the next kind of big cyber risk to businesses. And they outline in their report in great detail how deepfakes will be used for identity, data, IP theft, and for other forms of sophisticated fraud and social engineering. Yet business polls show that many businesses, whilst they agree that deepfakes could be a devastating threat to them, only a tiny proportion of businesses are actually prepared. for them in the context of the rapidly changing cyber threat landscape. So I'd like to put it to the audience. What kind of policies should your organization put into place, whether they relate to governance, technology, education, or otherwise, to ensure that both your clients, partners, but also employees will not become a victim of deepfakes?
Well, that's a great question, Nina. I think, especially with the context that you already described and the necessity for some kind of regulations. But I think organizations cannot afford to wait for the government to come up with those regulations. So let's send the attendees back and see what they come up with. We will see them back here in exactly 14 minutes from now. And welcome back again to our studio in Bussum, close to Amsterdam. I hope that you had a chance to have a good debate and to answer the debate question. And what I find quite interesting, I already saw the result, but maybe we can show the results to everyone. We have about a 44 to 56% split between 44% people that say before something bad happens, we will have the policies in place. And 56% of the people says after something bad happens. Now, of course, I realize that if we would have asked the question, do you already have something in place? Probably, also listening to Nina, probably the answer, the percentage would be much lower. But to hear from some of the countries about what the discussion was about, I've sent Menno again on the journey. And so, Menno, where are you now?
Yes, Michiel, I'm flying over Bussum, where Marloes is hosting a Dutch group.
So, very interesting debate. So, Nina, your question triggered many debates, and I think that people are already thinking about what countermeasures they should take and what policies they should put in place. But now, for another question for you, Nina. So, in your first books, like I already said many times to you, which I love because I was constantly between this fascination and terrified every time I turned the page. But you play clearly the role of alarmist, right? Pointing people to a risk that they maybe didn't realize that they were running. Now, since that you published the book in August of 2020, of course, the technology has evolved. And like you said before, it will continue to evolve over the next foreseeable future. I know that you're now busy writing a new book more about the positive use, positive intentions for this technology. But in general, have you become more optimistic about synthetic media?
Look, I think it is a very nuanced field, and I wouldn't say that I was being an alarmist. I was merely sounding the alarm because I think the threat of maliciously deployed synthetic media is very real and constantly evolving. And we know, especially in the context of the global pandemic, that the corrupt information ecosystem has real life consequences, whether that be in public health and global politics or when it comes to business. However, like you mentioned, for the past year, I've been embedded with many of the entrepreneurs who are building the synthetic media companies of the future. And I'm not a Luddite or a technophobe. And it is clear to me that this technology is coming and that many of the founders in this space are good actors who are building incredible companies of the future. And moreover, they're eager to discuss an ethical framework for how this technology should be deployed. And these companies are actually already generating huge value for the businesses that they work with and their clients. So while a lot has been written about the malicious side of deepfakes, whether it comes to disinformation or deepfake pornography, like I did even in my book, what's abundantly clear to me is that the malicious use of this technology is only one side of the story. And there's clearly another, which is the story I'm telling next. And I'm telling it through the entrepreneurs who are building the synthetic future. And it is really hugely exciting, as well as the malicious side is hugely terrifying. So there are two sides to this coin.
So we can trust the future, Nina. That's what I understand from you.
Sorry to be the spoiler. There's a quiz question again. So we'll move to the Mentimeter, and sorry, but Nina already gave it away. But still, we will ask the question. A lot of famous people are getting deepfaked. And here you'll see Tom Cruise, and the question will be, watch the video, is this the real Tom Cruise or is it the fake Tom Cruise?
So, of course, if the people answer faster, they will get more points, right, Menno?
That's right.
So let's see what they're answering. They have 15 seconds again to get in their answer. And Nina kind of gave it away, but let's see if people still are critical. So that's the time. So, wow.
62% fake.
62%.
Yeah.
Fake, 39 or 38 probably, that's the rounding error, said it was real. What's the right answer, Menno?
Well, the motorcycle sound was real. And was fake, but Tom Cruise was actually real. Yeah.
So now people are confused. So
people are confused.
The video, the question that we asked, what they're seeing was real.
Yeah.
What they're hearing was fake.
But it was the real Tom Cruise.
Okay, well, interesting that we already got 62% actually tuned into the fakeness of the video. Yeah. So, Nina, we have another question for you from our panel. And so Zoe Skaman, I think you might have met her, I don't know, but she has the next question for you.
This is a question for Nina. So I'm super excited about the future of synthetic media and also deepfakes as well. I'm especially excited by some of the possibilities that are bubbling up at the moment, such as being able to actually supplant your face onto a protagonist within a game that you're playing. Also the ability for you to be able to share the stage with music artists, for example, to be able to put yourself into your favorite movies, your favorite TV series, etc., to really personalize the experience. But I guess the basis of my question is, how do we ensure that the negative headlines around synthetic media, around deepfakes, for example, don't hijack the entire narrative and therefore potentially throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of the possibilities because we're so focused on the fear aspect of it as well. So I'd love to hear more from you in terms of how you think we can actually make sure that we are more balanced in the way that we look at these things, as opposed to just going down the doom avenue.
Thank you for the question. And I think ultimately, as we've covered today, the story of deepfakes and synthetic media is both profound and nuanced. And as we've already discussed, like all powerful technologies of this exponential age, synthetic media is going to be an amplifier of human intention. So the technology itself is neutral. The real question is, how will humans apply it? And of course, that is a question that is as old as humanity itself, essentially, because you are asking, how do you control the worst impulses of humanity, especially when they're turbocharged by technology? There's no doubt that deepfakes are being weaponized, but it would simply be incorrect to claim that they're only being used for nefarious purposes. Brilliant people, businesses, and visionaries are building this technology for positive use. And I think the narrative is starting to reflect that, as these use cases, whether they be in corporate communications, education, research, entertainment, or even medicine, are starting to become better known. So I think the mainstream discourse is already starting to become a little bit more nuanced, but what I think will happen is that the discourse will evolve in two separate silos. One in which academics and researchers discuss the dangers of deepfakes and how to mitigate them, and another in which businesses and entrepreneurs develop the amazing potential of synthetic media. So I think what needs to happen is that we need to convey that these are both two sides of the same coin, because we have this really unique and small window of opportunity to set some ethical standards and norms around the synthetic future before it becomes ubiquitous. I imagine it as though we could go back to the 1970s and redesign kind of the internet to ensure that there were some safeguards embedded in the architecture of the information ecosystem and what has become since then. We have the chance to do that with regards to the synthetic future. So I wouldn't squander it while we still have the time.
Thank you so much, Nina. Thank you for being with us, but thank you for publishing your book. It was a great source of inspiration for us. And I hope all the attendees will read your book also. But we are looking forward to your new book coming out next year. So and hope to see you back next year talking about your new book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you for having me.
So we've learned that deepfakes can be good and can be bad, Michiel, today. They can be supportive, they can be destructive. But we've certainly seen that the world of what you see is what you get is over. That's history. And what's new is what you make can be fake. Now, I think to understand the implications of that situation, we really need to understand how human beings are perceiving reality. That's a tough question, Michiel. How do we digest information? How do we create our own ideas? And therefore, we need to find out what kind of algorithm, to take that metaphor, is running deep down in every one of us. And to answer that question, we have invited Professor Michael Klinkman, who will talk. Hey, I can already see him. Michael, happy to have you here. Great. Who will be our next guest. But first, we will have a 15-minute break. So have a coffee, have a social discussion or afterthoughts of what you've seen, and we'll see you back exactly after 15 minutes.